Good morning, and thank you all who have assembled here for this very, very important conversation about the importance of early childhood development and the long-term impact that it has on, quite frankly, our workforce and our workforce development, our responsibilities as a government to ensure that that all of us have that opportunity. I'm so happy to be here today with our Speaker of the House, Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi, with Christina Lopez, President of the Maryland Association for the Education of Young Children, and with Maria Isabel Ballivan. She's the Executive Director of the Annandale Christian Community for Action's Child Development Center. But before I turn the podium over to them, I just want to make a few remarks. Under the leadership of our speaker, we have passed the Build Back Better initiative, which has made great strides to rectify many of the long overdue investments that we've not made in our nation's future. The research is in, y'all. It's in. There's no debate, no excuse that children whose families have the adequate resources to provide them with early childhood educational experiences have better health outcomes, better educational outcomes. They're more prepared to enter the workforce. There's less incarceration, and there's a greater opportunity for them to fit into society better. The benefits of early childhood development, of course, increases the likelihood that they're going to finish high school. This is all predictable. I remember being in the state legislature, and if a kid couldn't read by third grade, that was an indicator that we needed to build a prison bed for that child. This is how strong there is an indication and a connection with those initiatives. I come from the state of Wisconsin. This is for the teacher. I come from the state of Wisconsin. The state of Wisconsin was the very first state in the union to have her kindergarten. And we just thought, boy, we're ahead of the curve on everything by providing kindergarten for children. Well, folks, the science is in. 5, 6 years old is too old to start teaching our kids what they need to know in this high-tech society, in a place where we have global competitiveness. So the Build Back Better really, I resent hearing them call it social spending when it's an investment in our children. The K-3 provisions are absolutely necessary to educate our kids. But not only the child care provisions are absolutely necessary, the investments in the child tax credit, but not only do they help these children, but they help our bottom line, y'all. They help our economy to grow. And if we, I once heard somebody say, if you only got a few dollars to invest in your kids, you're much better plowing those dollars into early childhood than saving up to send them to Harvard. Because if you do what you're supposed to do early, they will, in fact, have all the opportunities that they need. So rather than go on and on, I really have been joined again by really distinguished people who will share their personal experiences with you, and they have experiences not only within their own families, but beyond that, helping other families. But of course, with the second woman speaker in our history, succeeded only by the first woman speaker in our history, and of course, the best speaker that has ever visited this Capitol, Speaker Nancy D'Alessandro Pelosi.
I didn't know whether that apple was a prop, lunch or a tomato, actually. I wasn't absolutely sure. Thank you, Gwen Moore. Thank you for your very kind words of welcome, which I accept on behalf of the House Democrats who have been such champions for the children. Thank you for the history that you bring to all of this as a state legislator, as a community activist who cares so much about the children. Thank you for your leadership role on the Ways and Means Committee that has some of the jurisdiction of the Build Back Better legislation. And thank you for your leadership role on the committee to fight against economic inequality, the Select Committee on Economic Disparity and Fairness. Chaired by we thank the committee for its leadership and focus, and we're also joined by another member of the committee, Angie Craig from Minnesota. And I'm sure she's going to brag about Minnesota being first one way or another in all of this. But we thank her for what she brings to the table in terms of economic opportunity, disparity, and fairness in rural America, as well as across the board in our country. When the committee was established, it was to address what we saw as a growing disparity in our country. We wanted them to, so many suggestions were coming forth from members and the rest, and we wanted the committee to take a very values-based view of what some of these suggestions were and how we could put them into legislation to make the difference. Their work, they have much more to do and have plans to do so. I can say as one who sat firsthand to see their discussion with their witnesses that they are right on point, again, for the children. So, again, some of the other members may be joining us, but for now, let's just say I had always thought that unless we addressed this disparity issue, if we had been an older country, we would be a caste system by now. It's that drastic. Something had to be done, and that's why last year we created the Select Committee to guide our work to equitable recovery, which builds back better than before. At its latest hearing made clear, by investing in our children, we build on inclusive recovery that helps everyone. Again, in San Francisco, if I may go back to my situation, we have a thing, children learning, parents earning. That is central to the Build Back Better legislation, which the Select Committee made so many important suggestions to. Universal pre-K, child care, family and medical leave, women to be able to be in the workforce, opportunities for children to learn when that happens, and not just women, moms and dads, being able to be safely in the workforce, being there so that their work is respected and their employers are not thinking their mind is someplace else. Of course, our minds are always with our children, but the fact is knowing they're in a safe learning situation makes a difference for mom being there. There's this expression, age quas agis, do what you are doing, enables women to make their mark, which, as we believe, when women succeed, America succeeds. This all comes together. And it is a moral as well as an economic imperative to meet families' needs. Informed by the Select Committee's work, our historic House-passed Build Back Better Act will again deliver a massive tax cut to nearly every family with the life-changing Biden child tax credit. It will dramatically lower cost of child care, capping at 7% of income what families spend. Secure 2 years of universal pre-K. That's music to everyone's ears. Universal pre-K to set students up for success and deliver more jobs, better wages, and stronger benefits for child care workers, respecting the people who do this work, as well as home care health workers as well, which enable women, men and women, caregivers, to be fully in the workplace. So it's a remarkable piece of legislation. I'm very proud of President Obama when we did the recovery, the bipartisan infrastructure framework, the BIF. It was a good legislation. But the president said, while I want to work in a bipartisan way and find as much common ground in a bipartisan way that I can, I will not confine my vision to America to just that. We need to build back better. And that's what this legislation does, again, for the children. And as I've said to them when I met them just now, I said to Isabel Bolivian and Christina Lopez that they are our VIPs. They can speak with such eloquence and authority on why this legislation is necessary and the good that it will do. We're very, very honored by the presence of both of them today, and it is now my privilege to yield to Isabel Bolivian and to hear from her on what we're doing for the children and thanking her for what she is doing for the children. After that, we'll be hearing from Christina Lopez, who will bring her that vision and values to this conversation as well. Before we hear from our other member of Congress who is here, Congresswoman Craig from Minnesota. But right now, the floor I yield to Isabel Bolivian.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Himes, and thank you, Speaker Pelosi. And let me also thank Representatives Moore, Craig, and Ocasio-Cortez. I am the Executive Director of the ACA Child Development Center in Annandale, Virginia. It's a community-based organization that provides high-quality early education for at-risk young children in Annandale, Virginia. And I'm here today in support of the Build Back Better plan. Early childhood education in America is a broken market in which service is too expensive for working and disadvantaged families, and centers' profit margins are chronically thin. Also, teachers earn poverty wages even though more than 80% have some level of higher education. Not surprisingly, 25% of them exit the field each year. Since the pandemic, the situation has gotten worse, forcing parents to leave the workforce due to a lack of quality programs. Estimates show that over 60% of U.S. centers closed and only 75% have returned. Currently, families who want to go back to work face long wait lists and increased tuitions. And centers are confronting critical staffing shortages. We cannot fully reopen the economy if we don't resolve this crippling emergency. ECE investment is a national security and economic imperative. If America is to continue to lead the world, it needs an educated, healthy, resilient, and competitive workforce. This begins with the youngest among us and requires trained and well-compensated teachers. Make no mistake, we are not babysitters. We are professional educators. We're building the brain architecture of young children. To deal with this growing crisis, families need an overhauled early learning ecosystem, one that provides quality and fair access to early education and prepares children for lifelong success. Also, tuition needs to be affordable, programs high quality, and the system should work for all, especially for working families. This is what we do at ACA. We invest in the professional development and improve wages of our teachers and ensure that children have equitable access to proven high-quality learning experiences. Finally, due to the pandemic, thousands of us have been risking our lives to serve young children and their families. From our perspective, all we ask for is the financial support and bipartisan will to give youngest citizens a real opportunity at the American dream. Thank you very much, and I invite you all to visit our program.
Oh, so thank you very much, Isabel. That had such clarity. The teachers are the custodians of our children for a large part of their day and their lives. They must be respected, well-paid, and well-trained. With that, I'm pleased to yield to Christina Lopez, who will share her story. Christina, thank you.
First, I'd like to thank Madam Speaker, thank you, and Representative Moore for this opportunity to share my story. My name is Christina Lopez. I am a proud mom of 6 children. I live in Southern Maryland, first-generation college graduate. I couldn't wait to become a teacher. I've loved children my whole life. Big Italian family that I grew up in, they were always around me. I got my first job in Prince George's County Public Schools as a kindergarten teacher. I taught for 5 years, and then I was lucky enough to teach pre-K. One of the things that I struggled with that has led me to my advocacy with Maryland AEYC, which is the Maryland Association for the Education of Young Children, is when I had my first child. And having studied the importance of early education and development, I knew what he needed. I knew what I was trained to give him. And when he got into the age of preschool, I wasn't able to provide that for him. On a teacher's salary, I didn't make enough money to qualify for support, and I didn't make enough money to pay for quality. The cost was astronomical, and I needed to pay my mortgage. So I had to choose, and lucky enough, I had family that could help me. As I advanced in my career in the public school system and had more children, recently my youngest, my 4th child, she's 3 years old. During the pandemic, she was diagnosed with autism. And I knew I had to get her in an early care setting. I knew it was going to change the trajectory of her life, but I didn't have access. There were no quality centers in my community. And even if there were, I would have had to sacrifice to make that payment, but I was willing to do it, and I had the privilege to be able to do that. But with the child tax credit, for the first time, my husband and I can pay for childcare and not have to sacrifice our financial stability and providing a future for our older children, which will be entering college soon. It has changed our lives. It gave us the money to find a place for her, but we still only found 3 days a week, 2.5 hours. That's what she gets to be with typical peers because the centers are struggling. My colleagues in childcare and family homes are trying to stay afloat. There is a critical workforce shortage. When I looked for childcare, they said, I only have 1 classroom open. We don't have enough teachers. So even though I had the money to bring her, and I had the will and the knowledge to put her there, I couldn't do it. This Build Back Better Act will change that. It will create space for these programs to thrive. It will give access to my family, but to millions of families that have been historically marginalized. I know the advantages that I have, but I still don't have the privilege of providing my children with what they need. And true American dream is choice. Freedom is choice. I should have a choice on where she goes. I should be able to provide for her. Because the truth is, the science is, these first 5 years are foundational for her, but they're foundational for all children. We're never going to get that back. And I'm still fighting, and I'll keep fighting, but this is a game changer. This will change lives. It will change our families' lives and so many more who have never had this opportunity. So thank you.
We are so fortunate to have our speaker still with us. Ms. Craig may return, but I do think this is a really good time to open up the Q&A for you. I'm hoping that you do have questions. We're really proud of the Build Back Better initiative, and we have our speaker here who knows this legislation intimately, and we have our guests here as well. So,
I think Angie went to vote.
yeah,
She'll
which
be back to say.
I
has
should be
something
doing
to
the same.
say. But let me just say about the Build Back Better, because if there were two words that I would say that describe it, it would be lowers cost. It lowers cost for health care. It lowers cost for education. It lowers cost for child care. It lowers cost for family home health care, for more senior members of the family who need health care, siblings who may have disabilities and the rest. It lowers cost. And that makes a very big difference. Lowers the cost of prescription drugs, lowers the cost of food, all of the things that people struggle over their kitchen table or keep them awake at night. So I just want that idea, in addition to promoting our values, it lowers cost. And now I see we've been joined by Angie Craig, as I said, who'll give a perspective from rural America. Angie. Congresswoman Angie Craig.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Speaker. And you can see Congresswoman Moore and I are trading off voting here this afternoon. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. And Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to serve on this select committee. I grew up in a number of different rural communities throughout my childhood. My story is I was the oldest kid of a single mother, and we lived in about 9 different mobile home courts, traveling around a number of communities in rural America. Most of my childhood, we didn't have access to health insurance. So when I think about Build Back Better, and when I think about the opportunity to support children across our nation, to me, this is one of the most critical elements, and it's why I ran for Congress, to expand access to and to reduce the cost of health care, particularly prescription drugs. And as I think about getting this across the finish line, my wife and I, we have 4 sons, which is amazing. Most of the time, they are not in our basement anymore, which is even more amazing. But more recently, we became first-time grandparents, grandmothers. And when I think about Build Back Better, when I think about what this bill allows my daughter-in-law to do, to choose, she gets to choose, does she go back to work if we have 4 weeks of paid family leave? She gets that special bonding time with my grandson, Noah, as part of Build Back Better. She gets access to pre-K for Noah, pre-K for 3- and 4-year-olds across our nation. And she gets to choose. We have a challenge right now. This will bring down the family budget, the Build Back Better Act. It will lower the cost of health care. It will lower the cost of child care for a family like my son and daughter-in-law who are just starting out here in this world as a young couple. And it will do the things that give them the freedom to pursue the American dream. And so as we look at economic disparity and fairness and growth throughout our country, I'm honored to be on this select committee focused on rural communities and focused on family farmers. See, my grandmother's now 95 years old, and she lives just off the land where my grandfather farmed all those years ago. And my grandfather lost his job as a farmer in the 1980s farm crisis. Those rural communities across our country, they are decaying. There is a significant need for investment, certainly in highways, roads, and bridges, as the BIF bill provides, but there's also a long overdue investment in Americans and Minnesotans in our nation. So thank you, Madam Speaker, for this great event here today. And I just want you all to know, on behalf of the single most perfect human ever born in the history of the planet, Noah, I will keep fighting until we get this across the finish line. And I would just say, Senator Manchin, this is Noah. He's not eligible to go to child care until he's 6 weeks old. So, Senator, I know that your constituents, too, struggle for those first few weeks of life for our young people. And I would just say to you, look at Noah, look at the beautiful children of your constituents, and please, please bring America and paid family leave into existence. Thank you.
Let the record show that that's the longest Congresswoman Craig has spoken before she mentions Noah. Right?
My goal is to work him into every speech.
But usually you start with Noah. As she said, the single most important child ever born. Any questions for our guests? Yes, on the subject? Yes.
Madam Speaker, on the child tax credit, I have two questions. The first is, the CEO says over 10 years it would cost $1.6 trillion. Senator Manchin has voiced concerns about that. Do you support maybe trimming it or targeting it so that it brings the price down a little bit?
Well, it isn't in the legislation for 10 years. The cost of it is indicated by what is in the bill, and that is the price. That is why we're saying this is paid for. You could take any bill that has ever passed and said, well, if this went on for 10 years, if that went on for 10 years, it would cost this, that, and the other thing. This is not in for 10 years, so no.
And then my second on the child tax credit as well, analysis from the University of Chicago has said that it disincentivizes work because it's fully refundable. Do you think it's good policy to pump this cash into the economy that's not tied to work in light of inflation and a labor shortage?
Yes, I do completely disagree with the characterization you gave of that report. I haven't seen it, so I don't want to debunk it, not seeing it, but your characterization of it. This is about families making ends meet, about women and men who have family responsibilities being able to go to work. What we see with this legislation that has already been part of the rescue package, but now will come to an end the end of this month unless we act, is that people are paying for essentials. They're paying rent. They're paying for food. They're paying for school supplies. They're paying for things that they need. They're not paying to sit on a beach someplace because they don't want to go to work because they get this credit. I think that comments like that are disrespectful, condescending to America's hardworking families. Any questions that any of our colleagues would like to weigh in on any of this? Isabel?
I had the privilege to introduce the release of the ARPA funds with the First Lady. What I have been able to do with the funds that we have received so far, which were not little, is to give 60 cents increase to my staff members. You tell me, how do I ask my staff members to continue to be there for our children if they don't have the opportunity to afford living in the area, to afford caring for their own families? This needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now.
I'm going to have to excuse myself. We're going to have a moment of silence now on the floor in which I must preside on the victims of the deadly tornadoes that have taken place. So forgive me for leaving, but thank you. Others have availability. Thank you so much. I know, speaking firsthand, your eloquence will convey the intent, the values, and the practicality of the legislation. Thank you.
Does anyone have any final questions for our two folks? Yes. Well, all curriculum is set at the local level, at least in Minnesota, both the benchmarks and the standards. And, of course, parents have the opportunity to weigh into the curriculum and those standards. So I can't speak for the rest of the nation, but in Minnesota, it's a very, very clear process. And I'm assuming there is a process. It may be slightly different for each state around the country. But, you think about 3- and 4-year-old access to pre-K in particular. We know that this is the best return on investment we could be making for our country. I'm a huge supporter of community college and trade schools. I was devastated that part of that was taken out of the Build Back Better Act in a compromise. But I also know, after spending 22 years in the private sector, that if we produce educated young people on the front end, if we make sure that we're fully funding our public schools, that those individuals are going to turn into tax-paying citizens who, in the end, contribute to the wealth and the growth of our nation. And so that's why I think this is just such an extraordinary investment. We certainly do have a workforce shortage in our nation, and this bill will provide and give parents the freedom to decide, can I go back to work? Back home in my Minnesota district, childcare ends up, for a family of 4 with 2 children in daycare, just an extraordinary amount of percentage of the monthly bill. So we're talking about reducing expenses. We're talking about investing in the young people of our nation to produce, in the end, citizens who are fully contributing and tax-paying Americans. Yes, and then I need to go honor as well. I think we need to, obviously a full plan of implementation is yet to be built by HHS. We need to see that plan be built and to fully analyze it, but that certainly would never be the intention. At the end of the day, we, in Minnesota at least, we will see a significant number of my constituents and their families' daycare costs go down. And at the same time, we'll free up people to choose if they want to go back to work. But childcare is work, and it's time we recognize that in our nation. So thank you. Thank you all.